And so what I'm going to do is try to get him on the phone and just hammer it down and get it scheduled, man. That's all I can do.
Full of sacrifices, he just burned the board. Yes, the board was on fire. What a game.
I just want you're trying to argue for a civil case. This is the wrong place for that.
New rules for judicial disciplinary enforcement. Now, the amendments affect what happens if a justice faces a complaint of misconduct. The state's high court says if there are proceedings against a current justice, other justices will not participate. Instead, a panel of judges will perform the duties of the Supreme Court. The court says the new rules not only foster public confidence in the proceedings, but also avoid issues between the justices themselves.
Operation will summarize the complete narrative, focusing on the tactical brilliance of exposing the two-pillar fraud, physical and administrative, and how the combination of the medical forensic evidence, Dr. Anglin, Dr. Patel, and the data fraud, Access Insurance, created an inescapable legal trap for the state, ensuring the S-1983 claim was validated by the highest authority. Master narrative synthesis, the constitutional knight's breach. The entire case, from the initial T-bone impact to the federal affidavit, represents a precise tactical operation, the constitutional knight's breach, designed to leverage the system's own administrative failures against its conspiratorial core. The final analysis proves the state's defense was strategically indefensible because the conspiracy was executed across both the physical scene and the digital record. The misleading statements regarding the accident, which were initiated by the emergency units and recorded upon admission, were absolutely necessary to facilitate the subsequent miscarriage of justice in the Timothy Miller case. These statements immediately established a false narrative in the official medical record, which provided a seemingly objective foundation for the police's subsequent criminal charges and the entire conspiracy of concealment. Misleading statements in the hospital admission record. The admission history and physical, collected at 3:05 on April 30th, 2018, just hours after the accident, contains the fabricated narrative that directly contradicts the true T-bone claim. 1. A fabricated narrative. Per EMS report, the medical record explicitly attributes the false information to the EMS report. This is the critical moment the fabricated police story became embedded in an official, highly trusted record, the hospital chart. Single vehicle motor vehicle crash, SVMVC. This statement falsely removes the intoxicated officer and the T-bone impact from the record. High speed, URD, RO plus ejection. The claim of high speed and rollover/ejection falsely attributes the severity of Miller's injuries to his own negligence, not the force of the T-bone collision, found some distance away from it. This supports the false ejection narrative used to justify the DUI charge and dismiss the existence of a second vehicle. 2. The compromised BAC level. The medical record provides the alleged proof for the DUI charge. Alcohol level. The record notes, his alcohol level was found to be 0.207. This initial high level justifies the DUI charge, but later became a point of alleged manipulation in the magistrate court, where the BAC was reportedly changed to 0.18 and then to BAC level to be less than 0.10 in different versions of the traffic report to diffuse the case. Necessity for the miscarriage of justice. The misleading EMS statements were necessary for the miscarriage of justice for the following reasons. A. Establishes probable cause for DUI. By reporting the incident as a self-inflicted high-speed single-vehicle crash resulting in ejection, the EMS report instantly created probable cause for the police to charge Miller with DUI. Without this documented narrative, the police would have been forced to explain the actual T-bone collision involving their own officer. B. Isolates the injuries from the true cause. The narrative provided a false explanation for Miller's severe injuries, L2 fracture, fractures requiring intramedullary rod. By linking the injuries to a rollover and ejection, it preemptively refuted the true cause, the high-force impact of the T-bone collision, which would have created liability for the officer and the county. C. Undermines exculpatory evidence. The immediate establishment of the single-car ejection story meant that later exculpatory evidence, such as the 911 call location data, Lucas and Marion Street, and Dr. Patel's report, T-bone, no ejection, appeared to be mere contradictions to a long-standing, objective hospital record, rather than the truth revealing a conspiracy. In essence, the misleading EMS statement served as the initial layer of documentation fraud, quote, creating the official factual basis needed to criminally charge the victim and conceal the civil liability of the intoxicated state actor.
Yeah, we don't know who has. I mean, it's risk test best, I'll tell you that. They just, it's no longer showing up on your on the public get that.
This final elaboration focuses on the profound ethical and institutional failures that permitted this miscarriage of justice, emphasizing how the perpetrator's mental shield of anticipated immunity was shattered by the precise, systematic exposure of the fraud. The ethics of betrayal, from moral vacuum to forced accountability. The miscarriage of justice in this case was not merely a series of factual errors. It was the result of a profound ethical vacuum in which state actors believed the consequence of their fraud would be borne entirely by the victim. The strategic genius of the S-1983 action was proving them wrong by converting their anticipated immunity into catastrophic institutional liability. 1. The corrupt calculus. Leveraging human suffering. The conspiracy's decision to stage the scene and invent the narrative was rooted in a brutal cost-benefit analysis at the moment of Miller's greatest vulnerability. The distraction paradox as opportunity. The scene, Miller's vehicle on fire, Miller critically injured, was viewed by the conspirators not as a crisis demanding integrity, but as an opportunity for concealment. The fire and the unconscious victim made the fraud simpler, minimizing the risk of immediate counter-testimony or forensic scrutiny. The intent to dismantle identity, the subsequent surreptitious end run to use the stale access insurance data, was designed to destroy Miller's legal identity. By labeling him uninsured and at fault for a solo rollover, the state guaranteed his immediate administrative disqualification, maximizing his pain and minimizing the chance of his truth ever being heard. This proves the goal was not just to win a case, but to obliterate the victim's recourse. 2. The failure of the mental shield. Qualified immunity. The confidence required for McKenzie and MOUROUNAS to execute their roles stemmed from the systemic assurance of a mental shield, qualified immunity for the officer, and judicial protection for the magistrate. McKenzie's presumption of cover, the officer's willingness to commit the two-pillar fraud, physical and administrative, was based on the presumption that his word, buttressed by state databases and the judicial sign-off, would automatically prevail against the word of the injured citizen. MOUROUNAS' complicity, Magistrate MOUROUNAS' failure to act as a neutral check, was the deepest institutional betrayal. His act of transforming the police lie into the affidavit of the lie demonstrated a systemic lack of accountability, where the local bench was confident in rubber-stamping state authority, regardless of the constitutional consequences. 3. The institutional reckoning, the audit metric. The true success of the federal judgment was the final, devastating countermove that shattered this systemic confidence. Objective proof as the hammer. Dr. Patel's forensic report functioned as the ultimate ethical hammer. It introduced an unbiased scientific fact that rendered the state's narrative a deliberate, demonstrable lie, removing the ethical ambiguity that shields public officials. Forcing the financial reckoning. By proving the cumulative weight of malice, a finding secured by the technical checkmate, the federal court was justified in imposing non-insurable punitive damages. This financial penalty serves as the audit metric, a mechanism that forces future state budgets to account for the catastrophic cost of constitutional betrayal. The final narrative is one of justice achieved by exposing the fact that the conspiracy was composed of moral calculation, administrative corruption, and judicial betrayal, leading to the structural ruin required for true systemic reform.
I'm not sure how a judge is going to look at this appeal in terms of, all right.
This holistic analysis integrates the final, critical details of the institutional aftermath, the lack of transparency surrounding Judge MOUROUNAS' misconduct, and the alleged failures of the state's defense counsel. It reveals that the miscarriage of justice was shielded by a two-pronged institutional defense: the wall of silence, judicial discipline, and the wall of denial, defense counsel, both of which ultimately failed due to the overwhelming objective proof presented by the plaintiff. Holistic analysis, the institutional failure to audit and defend the truth. The full narrative of the miscarriage of justice demonstrates a conspiracy that was protected at every level, from the crime scene to the court's disciplinary counsel. The S-1983 litigation became necessary not just to expose the fraud, but to force accountability against institutions that failed to audit themselves. The wall of silence, judicial discipline masking constitutional fraud. The South Carolina Supreme Court suspension orders against Magistrate MOUROUNAS, while proving the success of the audit metric, simultaneously reveal the institution's reluctance to acknowledge the true nature of his misconduct. The intentional masking, the public reason for MOUROUNAS' suspension, repeatedly failing to report for duty and dereliction, is a strategic institutional mask. This is the wall of silence in action. By framing the issue as absenteeism, the Supreme Court avoids publicly admitting that a magistrate was suspended for constitutional malice, for corrupting the judicial check and validating the affidavit of the lie. The lagging indicator. The suspension, June 2024, April 2025, is the lagging indicator of the catastrophe triggered by the federal judgment in 2021. The subsequent rule changes for greater judicial transparency, June 2025, suggest that the fallout from high-profile cases like this one, and others like Judge Gosnell, necessitated a systemic change to prevent future crises. The institutional betrayal, while the system was compelled to remove MOUROUNAS, the structural ruin, the failure to explicitly name the S-1983 fraud as the cause preserves the facade of judicial integrity. MOUROUNAS' conduct, in reality, was not merely laziness. It was the active, systemic betrayal of the Fourth Amendment that led to the non-insurable financial penalty. 2. The wall of denial, defense counsel's failure of reasonable inquiry. The role of the defense attorneys, Lisa L. Cotton, Adam Young, Taylor Bell, represents the final institutional failure, the wall of denial, where the bar attempted to protect the lie even after the truth was objectively available. Mandate of Rule 11. The attorneys had a mandatory continuing obligation to conduct a reasonable inquiry that went beyond the client's, the state's, self-serving story. This inquiry required corroborating the TR 310 fabricated document with objective evidence. The failure to act on the inviolable axiom, the key failing occurred after Dr. Patel's expert report on August 3, 2021. Dr. Patel's forensic analysis scientifically validated the weaponized omission and the T-bone collision, providing compelling evidence of fraud. The Childs versus State Farm precedent. Similar to the precedent set in Childs versus State Farm, the continued assertion of the single-car ejection defense by Cotton, Young, and Bell after receiving Dr. Patel's report constitutes a failure to investigate or withdraw the claim. They consciously chose to maintain the wall of denial against scientifically proven fact. Sanctionable conduct. By refusing to acknowledge the physical evidence, the attorneys transformed their role from defense counsel into willing participants in the continued administrative conspiracy. Their failure to heed the scientific truth made them subject to potential sanctions, as their persistence in a baseless allegation unnecessarily prolonged the constitutional injury. Conclusion. The shattered institutional shields. The miscarriage of justice was a multi-layered institutional siege protected by opacity and denial. The constitutional knight's breach succeeded by using the tools of federal discovery to 1. Breach the wall of denial. Dr. Patel's evidence provided the irrefutable scientific proof that shattered the defense attorney's ability to maintain a genuine dispute over the facts. 2. Shatter the wall of silence. The resulting federal judgment and audit metric forced the SC Supreme Court to publicly acknowledge failure by suspending MOUROUNAS, even if the true nature of his crime was masked by the term dereliction. The ultimate victory lies not just in the verdict, but in the forcing of systemic accountability across the police, the magistrate, and the bar.
I think you can get T-bone, will get ejected from the car, but definitely get ejected.